Welcome to this live stream then. Rob Staton and Robbie Williams are here to discuss this breaking news in the last, 90 minutes or so, that Carlos Dunlap has been released by the Seahawks. And Robbie, this is the third year in a row where the Seahawks have parted ways one way or another with their best pass rusher. In 2018, it was Frank Clark. They traded him to the Chiefs. Last year, Jadeveon Clowney tests free agency. They called him the priority, but they couldn't come to an agreement to bring him back, and now it's Carlos Dunlap. And, it's the same offseason, it seems, in terms of pass rush. Every single year, they are scrambling around trying to find options. Now, look, we're going to get into the meat and bones of this. People will say, and let's just get this one out the way right now, Robbie, that people will say there's still a chance that Carlos Dunlap could come back. Now, looking at the way he tweeted and looking at some of the things that people are saying, I'm not convinced that he will be coming back, quite frankly. I think he's going to test the market and see what's out there. And the way that he played in the second half of last season, I think there'll be a decent market for him, especially when you look at what J.J. Watt has just received with the Arizona Cardinals. But, it doesn't really matter whether or not he comes back or not. The fact is that every single year, the Seahawks have this huge gaping hole when it comes to the pass rush. And there's no real planning here. This is a really important area of the team. It catches them because they go into every free agency period, draft, regular season with inadequate options on the defensive line. And I'm really fearful as we sit here today, Robbie, now that Carlos Dunlap has been cut, not extended, to get his cap hit down, that they're going to be in the same position that they've been in for the last 2 years, which is just not good enough up front.
Yes, incredibly frustrating, right? You said it right there. The last 3 years in a row, we've been talking about the D-line. Last year we went on and on and on and on and on about Jadeveon Clowney. Now this year we have Carlos Dunlap, who has been awesome for us. I don't really understand the thought process by not extending him and bringing him on, for a little bit longer. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and I'm gonna just see what they do with that $14 million. Like, is that going to go to Corey Linsley, or what are their plans? Like, we're going to have to do something with it. But even if we go get, someone on the offensive line, we're going to end up having to, fill that void on the defensive end. And I don't want to see people saying, well, Darrell Taylor or whatever, LJ Collier, like, these guys aren't good enough. These aren't the guys we need. And Dunlap came in and proved right away that it's the guy we want. And so it's just frustrating, man.
I just really, it's not a huge surprise, Robbie. Let's just sort of make that clear right now. I'm not sitting here, and I'm sure you're not either, thinking, well, what a bolt out of the blue, because this had been somewhat touched upon. We had ESPN saying that it seems likely that he'll be cut, and Brock Hewitt then said last week that he was expecting that Carlos Dunlap will be cut. And they have no money. They have a couple of $1 million of cap space or something like that. They've got a whole bunch of needs, haven't they? The idea of cutting him and creating $14 million is not a huge shock. I think for me, it's just the concern of where they go from here in terms of what pass rushers they're going to get in, and whether they're going to be in the exact same situation. When you have two years in a row of essentially the team just not having a plan and sort of, okay, the plan's Clowney, but then when that doesn't work out, where do you go from it? Benson Mayowa and Bruce Irvin, and then months go by and there's no solution, and then all right, they trade for Darrell Taylor, but we all know by now that was a bit of a shot to nothing, really, because of his injury as well. And I just fear that let's just cast our minds back to the start of the 2020 season, Robbie, when the Seahawks had no Carlos Dunlap and they were fielding the worst defense in the league and one of the statistically worst defenses in NFL history. Carlos Dunlap wasn't the only reason why the defense turned around, but he was a big reason why. And Benson Mayowa was a free agent as well. And Bruce Irvin, you didn't have him for most of last season. He's a free agent too. So right now, as things stand, your defensive line, your starting DNs are going to be who? Like LJ Collier and Rasheem Green? Because you can't bank on Darrell Taylor being healthy. We need to see him out there playing games for the Seahawks before you can invest any faith in him. And even if he does play next year, Robbie, in what kind of shape is he going to be in? He won't have played for nearly 2 years by that point. So I don't really see what the plan and the process is. And again, maybe Carlos Dunlap comes back. My argument would be with With what money though, Robbie? Because yeah, they've created $14 million of cap space. Maybe they'll borrow and lend on the cap next year and give Bobby Wagner his $26 million cap hit in 2022 or something like this. I don't know. Maybe that's what they're going to do in order to get even more room. But let's just think. It's not just, this is another hole that's been added to the list. You've now got cornerback because of Shaquille Griffin. That's a need. You've got, I would say that the tight end position, you've lost 2 tight ends. I think you need to bring one in, even if it's just a late round draft pick or a cheap free agent. You've got a left guard that you've got to bring in. You've got a center that you've got to bring in, or you've got to extend the guys who are there. Running backs a need with Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde both being free agents. Your third receiver is out of contract. Philip Dorsett, Josh Gordon, David Moore, all out of contract. There are other players, just depth pieces. Cedric Abui's out of contract. Players like that. You've got so many needs, Robbie, that $14 million, unless you're going to sign 7 players on $2 million each, then you're still going to have all of these needs. So the idea of going and just re-signing Carlos Dunlap without other substantial, significant moves isn't great. And I can already see, I think Greg Bell's already tweeted out, well, yeah, they could have had Carlos Dunlap. Maybe this money will go towards signing a center or a guard or something like that. Well, that's fine, but then you've still got a whole bunch of needs, including finding a pass rusher. So $14 million is nowhere near enough to get everything done. You've only got 4 draft picks. So, and look, I went on the Pro Football Network mock draft simulator yesterday for the first time, by the way, with no excitement whatsoever, given that last year you could do it and they had 3 picks in the first 2 rounds. 1 pick in the first 130 picks, Robbie. That's not enough. You can't pick once in the first 130 picks in a draft. The resources just aren't there. The players just aren't there. I mean, there's a huge issue with the team right now that extends beyond any Russell Wilson drama. Where is this franchise going? And it's not just about Carlos Dunlap. It's the complete outlook of the team right now.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. What's the next knee-jerk reaction, right? This is what's going to happen next, and I don't see the plan. I mean, maybe they have a plan in place, and you're right. Maybe they do have some sort of deal in place with Carlos Dunlap already, but we still have a lot of holes to fill, like you said. And so I think this is just one move of many that we're going to see that we're probably not going to enjoy this offseason. I just don't know where we're going as a franchise, as a whole. I just don't really understand. There's a lot of Russ rumors and all these things going on. I really have no. I just can't see it. I have no idea what we're doing. And getting rid of what, in my opinion, was our best pass rush. I mean, you could say Jamal Adams is, but I think Carlos Dunlap allows you to just rush 4 instead of having to, generate blitzes with Adams. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I don't really know where they're going. Super frustrating. I really like Carlos Dunlap, and I hope he comes back.
Yeah, I hope he comes back as well, Robbie. But I don't know. I mean, for me, again, it's just indicative of why this team has not been built properly since the reset. I mean, that was a great chance to go through some short-term pain, but to just draw a line under one era, which let's just call it the LOB era. When Sherman left, and Cam was obviously going to retire down the line. Cliff was going to retire. Cliff Averill. Michael Bennett was traded a year after they gave him a huge extension. They took on a huge dead cap hit there. Funny that. Maybe that's something we'll talk about before the end as well. But, all of those things. And then it was okay, it's a new group. It's a new energy. It's building around Russell and Bobby and different people now and doing all of that. And I mean, look at what they've ended up doing, Robbie. I mean, right off the bat, I was watching some footage of the 2018 draft last night, and I won't reveal why I was watching that footage. That's a conversation for another day, but I was watching it nonetheless, and I thought, oh, what the hell, I'll watch the Seahawks pick in 2018 again. It was Rashad Penny, and there was a huge surprise reaction, and I just kind of sat there and I kind of looked at the players who came off the board between 18 and 27 that the Seahawks could have had. Obviously they traded down to 27, no issues with that. They had 1 pick in the first round and then nothing till round 4, but they trade down and they take Penny instead of Nick Chubb. And we know Lance Zierlein, revealed that the Seahawks massively regret that. We know they massively regret not taking a player who was their ideal running back in 2018. But, that's the starting point. Then you trade Frank Clark, a week before the 2019 draft. You think you're going to get a great defensive lineman in that draft, Robbie, because it was a D-line draft. And, oh, look, they've all gone off the board. But rather than just move on to a different position, you force it and take LJ Collier. You think you're going to get Jonathan Abram in the end of the first round. You don't. but you trade down and you force it and you take Marquise Blair, and they made a bit of a dog's dinner of the 2019 draft. This weird investment that they've put in the linebackers. A year later they're already spending $25 million on Wagner and Wright. They've already traded up in the 2019 draft for Cody Barton, but we'll spend another first-round pick on another linebacker in Jordan Brooks. Then they go and add to their long list of safety investments. No, Quandre Diggs and Marquise Blair, they're not enough. And you, Guamadi, you've got to go and spend 2 first-round picks, a third, and a player on Jamal Adams as well. And it leaves you in this situation where you have no picks, no money, loads of holes, and people seriously wonder why Russell Wilson's dabbling with leaving. Because the reason why Russell Wilson, it's not just Pete Carroll, it's about the overall direction of this team, Robbie. When he looks at this, he sees it as well. He sees the pass rush as a problem. He sees that there are holes all over the roster. He sees that they don't have the resource in terms of picks and cap space. He doesn't believe in the vision that Pete Carroll has to take this team forward. And I think he's just completely lost faith in the team. And that's just another thing that's been added to this long list of reasons that if I was a Seahawks fan looking at this situation, I'd be hugely concerned about the direction of this team right now. I just don't think it's in a healthy position.
Well, first of all, you are a Seahawks fan, Rob. Remember that.
Sorry, yes. I'm speaking with my reporter's hat on there, Robert.
Yeah. There you go.
I am a Seahawks fan.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, listen, there's no one. I don't think anybody can blame Russ for why he wants to leave and such, because I mean, you look at the team and the problem is like Pete will look at it and go, 12-4. We were 12-4. Like we were, and you even hear some Seattle media say the same thing. Well, I know what everyone's complaining about. We're 12-4. We're right on the cusp. Like we've got good players. We do have good players, and I'm not saying we don't, but yeah, I just feel like we're still a long ways away from being that championship team. And I'm loving all these live tweets, by the way, or live messages. These comments are hilarious. Some of these are making me laugh. But yeah, I mean, just it's crazy that like the direction of the team. And I don't know. I feel like everything is just a knee-jerk reaction every year, and it doesn't feel like there's any sort of plan in place. And like you said, they think they're going to get a certain player. It doesn't work out the way that they want to do, and then they end up forcing the situation instead of taking the best player available in the draft. And that's really been the last 3 or 4 years of the draft, and it's been really frustrating to watch. So I don't know. We got to get back into this draft. What's the best way to do it? I mean, I see people saying it right now. We got to trade Bobby. We got to trade Jamal. I mean, there's a lot of things that we got to do to get back in this draft, and I don't know, man. It's interesting. It's interesting to see.
If you have a question, so I can stick these messages on here. So if you have a question that you want us to answer, feel free, stick it in the comments, and Robbie and I will address it. So Yusuf's got in touch. Was Dunlap cut so the Seahawks could absorb trading Russell Wilson away? Now, this is one thing I wanted to talk about, Robbie, because look, there has to be a method behind the madness sometimes. And there was another message just a second ago that said, would it have been better to trade Jamal Adams and extend Carlos Dunlap? Now, I would agree with that. Now, I don't know whether they've got some intel in terms of, well, Carlos Dunlap's only going to get X on the market, and if we extend him, it's going to be sort of like $3, $4, $5 million more than he can realistically expect to get on the market. I don't know if it's just because they look at, there is a reasonable list of free agent defensive ends who are going to be on the market there, Robbie. I'm not sure whether or not they're all going to be worth $3, $4, $5 million, like maybe the Seahawks are hoping. But there are going to be some names there. I did wonder, though, whether or not you create this room, and if the Seahawks really are going to trade Russell Wilson, and look, there's still some, you hear different things, don't you? So we all know about the tweet, the famous tweet from Adam Schefter by now. We hear Michael Silver saying it's a lot more serious than he initially thought. Then at the end of last week, Brad Biggs, who reports on the Chicago Bears, I think for the Chicago Tribune, said that the Bears' number one priority is trading for Russell Wilson. That's what they've set as that's the ultimate goal. And then you sort of start there and you work down your list of quarterback options. So there is some smoke, but then you also hear pretty much every journalist out there couching everything with a $39 million dead cap hit, and what could the Bears give up in order to make this worthwhile for the Seahawks? If the Seahawks are 14 million, 16 million, or whatever it is now, Robbie, over the cap space, then if they trade Russell Wilson now, they'll still have $9 million to spend right now with a whole bunch of picks. And then if you bring in Khalil Mack, then his contract is $17 million for this year, which is only $3 million more than Carlos Dunlap would have cost. So that would make some sense to an extent. If you were trading Russell Wilson and you're acquiring someone like Khalil Mack to take his place, that would make some sense if that was what the Seahawks are planning on doing. But it's whether or not they're actually going to do that. If that's the plan, and then maybe you can even get Carlos Dunlap back at a discount or somebody else to bookend with Khalil Mack, then we'll be having a very different live stream. But we have to sort of say that we're talking about trading Russell Wilson here. And that, and that's the incredible thing, that it's actually come to this where we're saying, well, maybe this is all tied to some kind of Russell Wilson trade, which would be incredible in itself and would be in itself a review of where this franchise is right now.
Yeah, and I like what Kyle says here. My biggest fear in this offseason is trade Wilson, waste the picks, keep and overpay Adams, and then cut and not resign Dunlap. I feel like this is the most likely outcome as well. And I feel like that as well, Kyle, to be honest with you. I feel like this is my worst fear in this whole scenario, is that we make all these trades or decisions to cut Russ and, bring all these players and picks in, and then we just waste the picks with more LJ Colliers and stuff like that. So for me, it's very frustrating to watch this go down. And I saw someone, well, why cut your best defensive end and keep Adams and Bobby? Like, I agree. I don't know why we would do that. Like, for me, it makes sense to trade Adams and keep Dunlap. I mean, I'm having a hard time. And the more I talk about it, actually, Rob, the more frustrated I'm getting, because it's like, it's like you start seeing all these people talking about it, and just why? Like, what is the actual direction? I don't see the plan, and it's hard to. Right now, it's like, again, this may be my knee-jerk reaction, but I want to know what the plan is, and probably won't know until the off season's over. But I really want to just know what's the idea. I mean, maybe tomorrow they come back and they say, okay, we've re-signed Dunlap to this extension, we just couldn't get it done at the time, or whatever the case might be, but.
I'll tell you what it feels like, Robbie. It feels like they're just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing if anything will stick. And it's felt like that for a while. And I think that was one of the comments that Colin Cowherd made when he returned from his hospital visit and returned to Fox Sports, was that he said that's what it feels like. And that's exactly what it feels like, whether it's the Jamal Adams trade right before training camp, a bit of a desperation move, whether it was going into the regular season with an adequate pass rush and then hoping that something will emerge before the trade deadline. And it did with Carlos Dunlap. If it didn't, then goodness knows how bad that defense would have been last year. And it probably would have continued to be historically bad. Whether it is, this situation with Russell Wilson now, not anticipating perhaps this to the level it has become. And you look at previous decisions, the Jadeveon Clowney, we're desperate. They almost went into the 2019 season with an inadequate pass rush with Barkevius Mingo and Cassius Marsh and Jacob Martin as your pass rushers until Jadeveon Clowney arrives. But then once they trade for Jadeveon Clowney, there's no kind of long-term thinking there. It's just, well, we'll spend a third-round pick on him for 1 year, and then we'll try and re-sign him. But then they don't get that done, which is fine. But then they didn't move off it, did they? They didn't move off quickly enough to turn their attention to anybody else. And thus the problems when you get to the draft, and then you have to trade up for Darrell Taylor because you've not addressed your pass rush. Then you feel like you've got to go and get Jamal Adams later in the year, and you've got to blitz him 8 times a game. I mean, just everything about it just seems like it's by seat of your pants sort of stuff. It's not, okay, we're here, and we need to get here. How does that sort of all work? The journey to get from where we are to a Super Bowl contention here. And look, people will say, well, they were 12-4. What are you talking about? They had a really good season. One of the first responses I had to a tweet about the Carlos Dunlap situation, Robbie, was, well, they keep winning. What are you talking about? Well, let's look at the wins last year. I mean, look, they only just beat a pretty poor New England team right at the start of the year. They only just beat a pretty poor Dallas team. They should have lost to the Minnesota Vikings. They should have lost to. Let's be really honest here. That final game against the Niners, they should have lost that game. They were came back at the end, and the Niners kind of fell apart. But for a large stretch of that game, the Seahawks were awful. There were other games. They played very close games, ugly game. The Washington game, where they nearly gave away a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter. Yeah, well done to the Seahawks. They deserve credit for having 12 wins, but it could so easily have been 9 wins, 8 wins, 10 wins, 11 wins. It could have been anything, really. I mean, they're so, the fine margins with this team are so close, and with that, and then they go and play in the playoffs and get their asses kicked by the Rams. So, I I don't think 12 wins is an argument. We've had a message here from Justin, Robbie. Answer this one then. Do we think the Seahawks are living in the past, thinking that their amazing culture will be enough to bring players crawling back after they've effectively been lowballed? Because this isn't the first time where the Seahawks have they've flirted with signing a free agent, or they've tried to get somebody back and they think they can recruit them, and then it doesn't happen. And it's been a long time now since they expertly recruited somebody. I'm struggling to think of anybody who they have, Robbie. It may even be Averill and Bennett in 2013.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely living in the past. And Pete probably thinks that he, has an amazing recruiting talent from being at USC and coming in. And I remember when he first came in and he brought in not Brandon Marshall, but who did he try to bring in?
Just straight away, it was Brandon Marshall.
Oh yeah, it was the Brandon Marshall. And I remember like him on the seaplane and all that stuff, and all this stuff. And it was like, but even then, he didn't sign with us, right? And so like, you got to wonder like, how good are they recruiting at players? And as someone said, why the hell would they want to come play here now? Like, it seems like everything I've heard and read so far, it seems like the Seahawks are just a dysfunctional organization right now. So why would players that are free agents want to come here? We're going to have to either overpay them to come, which takes up the cap space that we're going to have if we have any, and B, like you talk about our franchise quarterback wanting to leave. They're not going to want to come play for an Alex Smith or someone. That's just not going to be the case. So yeah, I don't really know, man. I don't know.
Answer the question there, Robbie. How do you think Russ will react to this?
I mean, how do you think he's going to be pissed? This is another reason why he's going to want out. I mean, we brought in Dunlap. It was a great trade. He played awesome for us. He was one of the reasons our defense turned around, and now he's gone. He's got to be asking the same questions we are. What's the direction? He's probably super pissed.
I mean, this one here, they just needed to go for it and really be all in, not signing a bunch of journeymen and average at best or broken players in it. Like I say, just to sort of enhance the view that maybe they just throw stuff at the wall and see how it sticks. I mean, it's not just sort of the last couple of years. I mean, how long did they go meander along with Bradley Sowell at left tackle, and then George Fant gets injured, so Reese Odiambo plays at left tackle, and then they have to go and trade for Dwayne Brown. Sheldon Richardson in the same year. They go and take Malik McDowell and make that choice to go with him, and then he obviously never plays a snap in the NFL. So then you go and trade for Sheldon Richardson for a year of Sheldon Richardson, and it cost you a second-round pick, and there's just. It's all this like constant short-term thinking. It's like, so here's the other thing, Robbie, like the issues between Russ and the Seahawks have been brewing for, a few years. And like everybody's been quick to remind everybody that, this recently, that John Schneider was at Josh Allen's pro day, and that he was at Sam Darnold's pro day, and they were watching all these 28, and the Seahawks apparently turned to John Dorsey and said, how about it for the first overall pick, Russell Wilson to Cleveland? They knew that there was going to be issues down the line with Russell Wilson. If they ended up trading him now, Robbie, and rather than just doing it 2 years ago, what does that say again about the Seahawks and about their sort of planning? And why would you sign Russell Wilson to a huge extension in 2019 and then move on 2 years later? I mean, like if this is inevitable now, you should have just done it 2 years ago, ripped the Band-Aid off, and moved on when everyone was younger and have all that cap space and you start of a reset and just embrace it. Like doing it now would feel like, well, it's 2 years later than it should have been. I mean, look, there's just so many things that are just confusing about this team. For a team that for so long, they were just perfectly constructed, weren't they, Robbie? For a long period of time, under Carroll and Schneider, the biggest off-season conversation we'd have is who are they going to sign at right tackle, or, where are they going to get a fourth receiver from in this draft? Whereas like now we're sort of thinking there's no long-term answer at left tackle. There's no long-term answer at cornerback. There's no long-term answer at pass rusher. The quarterback seemingly wants to go and play somewhere else. These are all huge issues. And it just makes you wonder. I'm not just worried about what Russell Wilson is thinking. I'm wondering what's DK Metcalf thinking? What are your foundation? What's Jamal Adams thinking? I mean, I personally would still trade Jamal Adams, whatever happens, and get the picks back and get out of that, because I don't want to pay him 18 to 20 million a year. But what's he thinking right now? If you're a player on that team, are you thinking, yeah, this is all great? Russ wants to leave, but this is a perfectly run organization. This is not. This is This is not a problem team at all. I mean, like this just reminds me of the teams, Robbie, that are in constant strife every year. There's just so much, there's too much drama, there's too much going on, and there's too little direction and plan.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. This is why I just said, like, who's going to want to come and play here when it's clear that the team is dysfunctional. And let's see, I wanted to answer this question in Utero or something like that. I'm not really sure what it said. It said everyone in the NFL knew Dunlap would need to be cut. Why is this a surprise? I don't think it's a surprise. Thank you. You put it up there for me. It's not a surprise. I guess we've been talking about it. I guess it's just frustrating that we didn't extend him because we had the opportunity to do so, and he was our best defensive end. I think just at this point, like, you want to have players that, especially on the D line, when it felt like we've been, like Rob had said, we got rid of Frank Clark, traded for Jadeveon Clowney, then you go from there, and every year it's snowballing effect on your defensive end, and it's kind of like our offensive line. We just need to build up our trenches, and I think he had a good opportunity to be that guy to help us out. I mean, he's 32. Could let him play for a couple more years, extend him and keep him. I don't think there was any reason to really need to cut him, and we could have worked the contract to where it really benefited us this year as well, as far as in terms of the salary cap. So I don't know, Rob, what do you think about that, Rob?
Yeah, I think as fans, Robbie, you just want to sort of generally agree with the vision and understand. So let me just sort of go back in time a little bit. When Jim Mora left, one of the biggest problems that I thought with that 1 year of Jim Mora is it wasn't obvious what the Seahawks were trying to do. What kind of a team they wanted to be, what the identity was. It all just seemed really bland and without any kind of direction. And then when Pete Carroll came in, Robbie, that immediately changed. It was like, this is who we are. This is what we're going to be. This is what a Seahawks cornerback looks like. This is what a Seahawks running back looks like. This is what an offensive lineman looks like. Everything was clarified, and the style and the identity was Pete Carroll's, and it was exactly what the Seahawks needed. And they built an amazing team, and they made their best moves with just turning over every stone. We're going to look for players everywhere. And they hit, and they just looked for these like chip on the shoulder guys, grit, physical. They created the toughest team that maybe has ever played in the NFL. I mean, like in the modern NFL, let me say, obviously not the overall NFL when players could get away with a lot more than they could now. I'm talking about the modern NFL, toughest team in the league. And it just seems that as having built that monster that sort of dominated the league for a couple of years, having to sort of move on from that, it was always going to be a huge challenge. And I kind of feel like they've just not done it very well. And now a lot of the vision and the identity and everything that you would associate on those early years of the Seahawks has kind of been muddled and gone. Like right now, when they draft Rashad Penny in the first round, you're kind of thinking, well, what is a Seahawks running back anymore? And when they investing all of their resources in linebacker and safety, yet wanting to be this tough physical running team that beats you up front in the trenches, and they've got no resource on the D-line and no resource really on the offensive line, Robbie, what's the identity there? And you invest $35 million in a quarterback, but then according to The Athletic, when he wants to come in and recommend a game plan for the Arizona game, he's having to storm out the room because you're not listening to him. Like, why would you spend $35 million on a quarterback and then not give him the kind of input that he's looking for? That just doesn't make any sense to me either. And it's like, well, everything just seems to be confused and jumbled, and the plan all of a sudden has gone. And I sort of sit here and think, I just want to see the direction the Seahawks are going in. I just want to know what path they're on so we can follow along with it, we can understand it, and we can embrace it. Right now, I'm sat here thinking, are they just waking up in the morning and thinking, well, let's just do this because we can, or oh, that move sounds good, so let's do that. And that it just kind of, there's no real sort of forward planning at a lot of this. It's just kind of this progressing along as you go. And the one thing that's kept them competitive more than anything else is the quarterback, and he wants out, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, like this is something that we're not going to really know what the plan is until after, Actually, I like this one. Looks like a Jenga game when that's 40 moves in. We're not going to know what their plan is really until the end of the offseason and see kind of like what they thought their direction was. But I think part of my problem is the last few years it hasn't felt like there's been an actual direction. There hasn't been an actual nothing actually makes any sense. I mean, I think at the time when we traded Frank Clark, he wanted this huge contract, and I kind of remember thinking, okay, this might be okay and such. But then our D line just got so much worse, and we didn't really have any direction after that. And again, knee-jerk reactions, trading for players, then not signing them, and I think overthinking or undervaluing the market, with players and I don't remember what his name is, but one guy that we tried to bring in, he was like really turned off by our like recruiting approach. And I remember reading that article and thinking he signed somewhere else. I mean, turns out it was a good decision. He didn't sign with us. It was a guard, and he ended up getting hurt. But it's just like, man, like I don't really know what their thought is. Like, I remember when we drafted DK, and he's like, oh, you're going to catch touchdown passes from Russell Wilson. And now, like, I mean, what's DK thinking? Like you said, what's he going to be thinking after this? What are all the players thinking? They got to be thinking, I want out too. If we trade Russ, they're going to want out. I mean, this is kind of what I was saying a while ago in our podcast. Like, I really worry about what DK Metcalf's going to think. And yeah, he's got, he's under contract, so he's got plenty of time, but I could see him making a big stink about it. It really all depends. And if we do trade Russ at this point, who do you bring in to play quarterback?
Well, I mean, it's just such, and that's it. That's what it is. I mean, let's just sort of wrap up a little bit. I want to get through it. If there's any other questions, we'll try and get some. Thank you. There's been so many messages coming in, Robbie. This is the first live stream that we've ever done. Usually we record the podcast. I'm going to do a few more of these, and it's been great. And it's great to have sort of your questions coming in as we speak. That's just the thought that I keep coming back to. Really, is that on the one hand, trading Russell Wilson and all the smoke around that. I'm very much a person that there's no smoke without fire kind of attitude, and everything that's been talked about, Robbie, and the fact the Seahawks haven't ruled anything out, and the fact that Russell Wilson's very quiet, and there's all this talk about Chicago and everything, and chatter doing the rounds, makes me think there's something in this. But if it happens, it's like, well, what then? It's not like replacing Carlos Dunlap. It's not like replacing Frank Clark. You trade him the week before the draft. You need a plan. You need to have all of your information on the quarterbacks in the draft. You need to know what veteran you're going to go with. It can't be knee-jerk. You can't be like, well, you trade Russell Wilson and then a few days later you give like a first-round pick away for Sam Darnold or Jordan Love, and that's it. That's the problem solved. No, that's not how it works. If they are thinking about trading Russell Wilson, I hope they spend the last 2 weeks, Robbie, just coming up with the most detailed blueprint. And this is just the first step in it, if that's what this is, in order to progress. Because right now, I just look at a roster that has got holes everywhere. Pass rush is now a hole, to go with cornerback, to go with O-line, to go with tight end, to go with running back, to go with a receiver. They've just added to the list with hardly any money to spend and no cap picks, no draft picks. And I still think that the best thing they could do, Robbie, is if they want to keep Russell Wilson and keep him on board, is just bring him in, have a conversation with him, give him some freedom, give him some control, and then you have to seriously consider shifting Bobby Wagner's $17 million salary for this year, $20 million next year, getting what you can for him, getting a bit more draft stock. You have to consider shifting Jamal Adams, $9 million this year, $20 million next year, and getting what you can for him. And you need to, with all that money that you've created, that doesn't come with huge dead cap hits for this year, you then go and get your offensive line sorted. You go and get a quality number 3 receiver. You go and get a good running back at some point. You use your draft stock to build up your offensive line and the skill positions. And then you just go and try and build a young, fast, angry defense. That is the thing that I talked about in my off-season plan. It's still what I think would be the best move rather than trading Russell Wilson. But either way, I feel like you either have to trade Wilson and go down that plan and then just go in a completely different direction, or you need to keep Wilson and you need to commit to him. What I don't want to see, Robbie, is we're going to try and keep a really unhappy Russell Wilson, not resolve really any of his issues. We're going to try and keep Bobby Wagner and Jamal Adams. We're going to go into a draft with 4 draft picks. We're going to go into free agency having just sort of borrowed a bit on next year's salary to create another 15, 20 million, something like that. And then we're going to just do what they did last year, which is sign a whole bunch of veteran journeymen and end up with a team that doesn't really look like a contender.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really sound very much fun to going down that path. But you're right. I mean, you can't go into it with an unhappy Russ. So you're going to have to do something, whether that's bring someone in on the offensive line or a stud third receiver or whatever the case may be. You got to do something, and you're definitely going to have a conversation. So I just worry about Pete being too, pig-headed about it and just, again, overthinking it and overanalyzing it and thinking he can just make it work, I don't know, man. You're right. It's kind of a bummer.
I'm just kind of looking at the questions here. I mean, maybe the NFL is quite funny, Robbie, and believe you me, this has been a 35 minutes of us complaining about the Seahawks. If something amazing happens tonight, tomorrow, next week, or whatever, you better believe that we'll be the first two people on here saying how amazing it is. We just call it how we see it. I don't know if you followed our podcast, maybe you're new, but we'll just say it as we see it. And look, we did a great podcast on Shane Waldron. It's the most watched podcast we've ever had, because it was basically an hour of us saying, well done, the Seahawks. And if they pull out all the stops this offseason, Robbie, as someone who has been accused of being too positive about the Seahawks for the last 10 years, and then for the first time has lost a bit of confidence in the direction of the team, and now is being accused of being negative sometimes, if they get it back on track, we will be on here saying, 2 thumbs up, brilliant. It is not about being negative for the sake of it. It's about wanting to believe in the direction and seeing the direction. And, and I genuinely believe that maybe any kind of loss of faith is shared by the quarterback. Let's just try and run through some of these questions to finish with. Hawks Gal says, if not Wilson, who is our quarterback? I see the reasoning on trading him now. I know we talked about it in the podcast the other day. Of any of those names that we discussed, Robbie, the Loves, the Darnolds, the Carrs, the Mariotas, the Smiths, the Minshews, is there anybody there who makes you think I could live with that or live with them in the competition? Or is there anybody at all? Whether it's we both like Kellen Mond, I like Davis Mills. I think you're maybe a little more lukewarm on him, but maybe I'm certainly not saying he's a bad player. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and a lot of it has to do with where we're trading Russ. If we are trading Russ, I still don't like the idea of trading him within the NFC. I just think it's a terrible idea. This is why I think the Raiders make a lot of sense. They can send us Carr back, and he's a proven player. You could still draft a quarterback to bring him in to compete, or have him, Carr be that kind of bridge gap. So I mean, I'm not saying Carr is like my favorite player by any means, but out of all the scenarios that I've seen so far, Carr is like the quarterback that I want, because he still gives us an opportunity to compete this year, which I want. I mean, Rob, I think everyone on this board that's chatting, that they all know what we want is to win championships. So whatever that takes to get there, let's do that. So I guess it really doesn't matter as long as we can compete for championships, and that's what I want.
Thank you. I mean, I'm just seeing the comments are really good, and it's I wish that we apart from the ones who were swearing, the comments are really, really good, and I think that in future streams it'd be good to just sort of do a real Q&A. I've seen this one here. Mike Silver just suggested a 3-way trade for Deshaun and a team of Russ's choice, from Riley there. Well, that's interesting if Mike Silver's throwing that out there, Robbie, because Mike Silver, I think he's one of the journalists, like a Schefter, Garofalo, that if they say something, it's worth not just writing it off. I just don't see it. I've never seen a 3-way. Like, why would Houston do that? People say, well, Houston could get a whole bunch of picks. Well, what exactly are they getting then? I mean, let's imagine the scenario. So are we saying that sort of Chicago get Russell Wilson, the Seahawks get Deshaun Watson, and what Houston get all of Seattle's picks and all of Chicago's picks? I mean, like, why would you do that? Because then what the Seahawks will be doing is giving up what little draft stock they have left and trading away Russell Wilson for Deshaun Watson. Otherwise, what's the point? Otherwise, why wouldn't Houston just deal with the Bears and trade Watson there? Because if they're not getting anything from the Seahawks, what's the point?
Could be a player. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. But I mean, I don't hate the idea of having Deshaun Watson on our team, but I mean, it's going to come at a high cost, and, what's the point for us as well? You have Russ already, and if we're going to trade Russ, we do need a quarterback back, but we also need picks. I mean, part of the reason to trade is to get back in this draft and get a bunch of picks, because like you said, we have a lot of holes, and we will create a lot more if we trade Russ. But I mean, if we could get a quarterback back in return, I think that's a good idea.
Well, we're going to wrap up the live stream at this point. Good 40 minutes there, and like I said, thank you for everybody's comments. And I just love the ones that while we're on here, because it always seems to be when we're on a stream, Robbie, that something happens. So now Greg Cosell's saying that if Wilson goes, they should get Gardner Minshew. Listen, it'd be fun anyway, getting Gardner Minshew in Seattle. And I think I'll say what we both agreed. I think the podcast before last, I just want a resolution one way or another, Robbie. I just want to know what's happening. I just want the Seahawks to either come out and say he's not going anywhere. That's it. You can put whatever he says, whatever that, he's not going anywhere. Or I want Russell Wilson to come out and say, I want to trade. This is me requesting a trade. Or I'm happy now. We've had a conversation. I'm ready to get on with it. Or him just to go. I just want to see a finality to this Russell Wilson saga, which is dragged on for nearly a month now. And how much longer can it go on for? I mean, it's not healthy. If the Seahawks think that not saying anything and not addressing it and it'll just go away is the way to go, that's not the best way to do it. Because if you don't address it and then you don't do in free agency what Wilson wants and he requests a trade 2 weeks into free agency, Robbie, then you've wasted free agency. You've wasted a chance to sort of, if he requests a trade then and you have to deal him, then you've wasted free agency and your chance to build up your roster. You know, you have to rip up a plan that you've made. And then you maybe sign Corey Lindsey to come and play with Russell Wilson, and then Russell Wilson isn't there. And here's the other thing, Robbie. Why would any free agents come to the Seahawks right now? If you're Corey Lindsey and you're saying, come and protect Russell Wilson, why would you come? I mean, it's just, I don't know. It needs, what is it, a week now? Yeah, it's a week till the legal tampering period begins. And I think that one way or another in the next 7 days, either we need to know that Russell Wilson is going to be the quarterback, not just for this year, but for the next few years. You can't be doing this every 12 months. We can't be having this same conversation about Russell Wilson's future in 12 months' time. It needs this sorting now, sorting for the long term with either like a new deal for Russ as a statement or as just a pure, I'm going to finish my career here or I'm going to play the next 10 years here or whatever. It needs to be something like that where Wilson says that, or they need to move on from him, so that the Seahawks can get on with life and they can get into free agency and do all this and we can know where they're going to go. But, you know, we've kind of gone off on a tangent there, but there are so many things to talk about. We probably could have done another 2 hours, but we'll keep our powder dry for another time. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining in the comment section. We'll be back on again soon. Head over to the YouTube channel. There's loads on there. Benjamin St. Juste interview, which has been quite popular. Could be a Seahawks cornerback in the future. He certainly looks the part when they used, back in the day when they used to draft cornerbacks. He's somebody that they could look at there. All of our other podcasts are on that. Whole bunch of draft prospect interviews. I've done an interview with another draft prospect, which is going to be published very, very soon. Peyton Turner from Houston, the pass rusher, is going to be on there. I've also interviewed Thomas Morstead, the New Orleans Saints punter, who has got roots in the United Kingdom. He's from his family are from just down the road from me, so I've been talking to him about that. I've been speaking to his mother and his uncle as well about his roots in the UK. So if you want to check out something a little bit different when you're walking the dog, you've got that option as well. SeahawksDraftBlog.com for all of the analysis. Please, if you're on the YouTube channel, subscribe. Let's get those subscription numbers up. It's criminal that some of these other teams, their podcasts have got like 7, 8, 9, 10,000 subs. I know we've only been doing it for a few months, but it's time to get our number up there so that we can show what the Seahawks are all about in terms of presence on YouTube. And like the videos, share the videos, spread the message, Reddit them, put them on forums, put them on Twitter, help get the message out there. We'll be back again soon. Thank you for all of your time. Let's hope the next time we're talking, there's some good news to talk about.